Good afternoon and welcome to the Hibs Observer live briefing this Thursday with myself, Liam Bryce, joined by Matty Fairnie to discuss all the latest from Easter Road in the wake of Tuesday's really disappointing defeat to Motherwell, and then looking ahead to a big test against Celtic at Easter Road on Sunday. Just before we get going, folks, as always, a word for our sponsor. The Hibs Observer is brought to you by S1 Jobs. If it's time to hand in your transfer request, then head over to s1jobs.com and upload your CV today. With thousands of jobs across Edinburgh and the surrounding area, you'll find the one at S1 Jobs. So start your search today. Matty, how are you after Tuesday? Are you feeling a bit more optimistic? Are you still down in the dumps? It's kind of hard to... It's hard to know what you're going to get from this Hibs team at the moment, isn't it?
It is, yeah. I was really flat after the game, really annoyed about it, and then we spoke about it on the One Bangers phone in last night. And what you find is you get a bit of balance. There's a bit of negativity, a bit of positivity around it, and I always find after having had a bit of a chat about it, I feel a bit better about things. So I don't know if it's just a bad day at the office or if there's a bit more to it. There's definitely some lessons there for David Gray to learn. But all we can do really is look forward. I mean, you sort of can review the game. Most important game is the next one, so hopefully the team are back at it on Sunday against Celtic.
Yeah, big game. It could have been had even more significance. I think if Hibs has got a result on Tuesday there, they would have gone into that game with the opportunity to overtake Celtic in the league, albeit Celtic would have still had a game in hand. So it's I suppose just adds to the disappointment from Tuesday night. I mean, not to linger on it for too long, but just to, I mean, it was one of those games. I think I was saying to you before we came on air, is like, I think for the various criticisms that will be levelled at Hibs across the season at David Gray, I think one thing that's pretty much always been consistent in the past year is that, and even in games that Hibs have lost and they've maybe not played well, you kind of felt that they were in every game. Almost most games, I think, competitive at least. They're not getting turned over by anybody. But I felt, that they were just not, even before the red card. I just felt like they were really struggling in that game. I know David Gray said he didn't feel that Motherwell had done anything particularly different to try and disrupt him, but the Motherwell manager himself sort of contradicted that. It did look as though they struggled with Motherwell's setup. So what I'm kind of just back to my original point, is just you don't see this Hibs team, get turned over like that. And I know the second half was a bit tighter, but I thought in the first half it was quite startling how far in second best they were across the pitch.
It reminded me a wee bit of sometimes when you watch the boxing and you anticipate like a good fight, and opening round, one of the boxers just lands a punch, and the other boxer just has no idea how to deal with it, and then the fight's totally one way after that. It was a wee bit like that. The team sort of were feeling their way into the game, and then Motherwell just stepped up a gear, and Hibs had no answer at all to what they were doing. They got the penalty. The second goal came quite quick after that, then the red card, and it was just like a total mismatch after that. I mean, I know the second half was a bit more even. Motherwell obviously 2-0 up. They didn't really have to do too much other than keep the ball. But I thought Hibs looked really out of sorts. Like they didn't have an answer to how Motherwell were countering us. Their manager said they pretty much stopped the supply to the midfield, and let Hanley and Iredale have the ball, and that's pretty much exactly what happened. You look at the first goal, comes to Iredale trying to dribble the ball out because he's got no options in front of him. I thought Hanley was a wee bit unlucky with the penalty. It's one of these ones that's I don't have very many complaints about the decision, but I don't know where Hanley's meant to put his arm in that situation. Same with the red card. I don't think he's meant to trip the boy up, but it's a red card by the letter of the law. And I just think that in games like that where we start slow, we need a couple of people on the pitch to go and try and make something happen, to figure out quickly that it's not working and do something different. And we didn't have that at all on Tuesday night. The players just kind of let it happen, and that's probably the most frustrating thing about it all for me.
Yeah, I mean, as you were saying there, it was, Motherwell, and as their manager said after, tried to stop the supply into the midfield and therefore onto the forward areas by letting the centre halves have the ball. And as you said, Hibs didn't really have any answer to that. I mean, it's a fairly simple tactic, and Hibs, as you said, they seemed a bit baffled by it. I think there was a couple where they tried to go long in response to it, and Motherwell were just mopping up the first ball and then the second ball, or it was going through to the goalkeeper. I mean, is that? I know it's only one game, but the fact that they had no response to it in terms of the setup, and I know the game was changed fundamentally by the red card as well. But does it suggest a wee bit of inflexibility?
It does, and I think the fact that we'd seen it against Livingston a couple of weeks back at Allenfield, where we had the draw there, it was another example of a team just stifling us and us not really knowing how to figure it out. Stark contrast to Dundee and St Mirren when we played them, and we were able to get on the ball a bit more. I think it's definitely an issue for Gray to sort out, because teams will suss us out. The other teams will look at that performance from Motherwell and see what did they do. They'll look at what Livingston did to us, and unless we find an answer for it, then we're going to have a lot more games like that. I'm not quite sure exactly what you do, whether you need to go wide earlier or drop another player into the midfield to get an extra man in there, or you take your, it was Barlasser, I think they were really sort of getting tight on. You maybe just need him to go in areas that the Motherwell players don't want to follow him into to create space for somebody else. Like these are the kind of things that players will need to think about, or Gray will need to think about. But it was a worry that we didn't really do anything to change it until it was too late.
Yeah, and it was I think in terms of Barlasser as well, that it was such a stark contrast for the weekend's game, because against Dundee he was just kind of allowed to just drop in, take the ball off the centre-backs and basically do what he wanted. So then there was almost like, it was as if there was a bit of a shock to the system there, and that suddenly there was such a contrast from being just allowed to have the ball or suddenly being, pressed, or indeed sort of marked out the game. And I think you could see him in particular. He was trying to pick up wee pockets, I felt, but it was Motherwell had that area sort of marshalled so well that it was all kind of in vain, to be honest. And it was a wee bit of a concern, I would agree with you. The kind of inability to sort of find solutions within that. Again, I know I go back to the fact that the red card fundamentally changed the game, but Hibs were already 2-0 down by that point. They were already in serious bother. And I know this is a kind of 2020 hindsight question, but were you surprised that they went with the same team again?
Nah, I kind of get it. Like it's we put a tweet out before the game always to say what do you think of the lineup, and you can generally gauge it, right? So when folk are unhappy, we get loads of replies, and when nobody's bothered, we get very little, and we got very little. And I think like there's always that sort of cliche about keeping a winning team. If it's not broke, don't fix it. All this kind of stuff. With hindsight, you probably would have changed it, but I didn't really have any arguments with Gray starting with the same team. I think going into this game, and the type of club Hibs are, and without being arrogant or conceited or anything about it, these are the type of games where you would want Hibs to be imposing our style on Motherwell and not feeling that we need to change to suit the game necessarily. And so having had success in the last two games with the lineup, and not easy games either. And folk will dismiss Dundee, but wasn't that long ago they beat Celtic. They've drawn with Rangers away this season. St Mirren's never an easy game. So to win those games comfortably, I didn't really have a problem with Gray backing those players to go and do it again against Motherwell. At least in hindsight, I would have changed it. But going into the game, no complaints.
I think so. I think that's a fair point. As so, I mean, changes. I mean, well, at least one is going to be enforced for this Sunday because Grant Hanley is going to be suspended, and I think that is a bit of a sore, because I think this is the kind of game where like Grant Hanley sort of relishes, where it's going to be a lot of penalty box defending, the need for leadership and experience. So, I mean, I know he was, he had a bit of a nightmare. Not all of it. I mean, the penalty again was harsh on him. Not much he can do about that. An element of misfortune about the red card as well. But in a game like this, Celtic coming to Easter Road, expecting to do a lot of defending, and considering how good he's been up to this point, you feel that he will be a miss, won't he?
He will, but it presents a good opportunity for Warren O'Hara to come back in, because you would
Yeah,
expect that there's like an easy solution to that one is you bring Rocky in one and put O'Hara on the right hand side. I think there's that wider thing, like does Gray go to a back four? Does he rip it up and change altogether? Or does he look at it and just be like, well, that was a bad night at the office. I still believe in what we're doing. We'll go with largely the same setup against Celtic as we saw
yeah,
against Motherwell. But I think it wasn't helped the fact. So not only did Hanley have a bad night, but Iredale had a bit of a shocker. Nicky Cadden
he
had a
did.
shocker.
Yeah,
Obviously, they both got hooked through the game. So you'd be looking at whether or not those players are starting against Celtic, or whether a beater comes in, and like I say, whether he just changes shape altogether. But it's a headache probably Gray could do without.
aye, it certainly is. I think Patrick and I think Craig and I have had this discussion before about going to, going back to a back four. I think there are certain areas of the pitch where it probably does work. It probably could be made to work. I think the issues is maybe when you come to the forward areas. I think this is a squad that was in the summer. I think added to and built and shaped with this current formation in mind. I don't think there can be
100%.
any sort of debate over that. And I think you could say, well, Ellie Yuan can play wide, so can Martin Boyle, and I think Yuan certainly no problem. But I think if you're talking about putting Martin Boyle back out wide, I think one of the reasons I think this current system was implemented was to change the role for Boyle, because I felt like at the start of last season he was really struggling out on that right hand side, because he has had to change his game a wee bit, and I think this a role with a bit more sort of freedom, a bit more centrally where he can drift, has largely been beneficial for him. So would Gray want to go back to that? Could you? I don't know if you would. Would you want to be playing Thibaut Clige out wide? He's coming as your record signing as a striker. It creates problems. I think that there's not a great deal of options. I don't think for Gray to go to that. I know you've got Nicky Cadden who can play left, but again, I go back to Yuan. He's not played a lot of football this season. Is he going to suddenly come in and be the main man on the right hand side? I mean, I dare say, it would. It could produce results. It's not for, I'm not completely writing it off altogether. But my kind of main point was I do think this is a squad that's been built with the current system in mind. And I think obviously Gray goes to a back four on Tuesday, but he's sort of forced into that because of the red card. I mean, what do you think? Would you like to see it tried? Would you like to see something different tried? Do you think it's a case of doing the same system but consistently better? Because I mean, we've seen, when it does work, this system, it can still be very effective. But we are maybe in a way that we weren't seeing last season. Maybe the wee examples here and there of teams figuring out ways to stifle it, I would say.
I agree with you in that I don't think we've got the players to go back for, particularly right back. I think you're looking at playing a player out of position if we go right back, or relying on Chris Cadden to do that role. And I don't think Chris Cadden is the best right back. He was definitely not the best right back in the league, but I don't think he's especially suited for a game against probably the best team in the league. I wouldn't want to have that area weakened. So I would probably stick with the same formation. I think the benefit that we get by playing Celtic is that they won't set up to stop us. Celtic will do exactly what I was saying, like you would like Hibs to do against Motherwell, which is to go and impose their game on us. So Celtic very rarely set up to stifle what Hibs will do. They will set up to play like Celtic, and I think we'll get a bit more time on the ball as a result. If anything, we'll probably set up a wee bit to stop the service to Callum McGregor. That'll be a wee job for somebody. You might see Josh Campbell come in and do that sort of role instead.
Yeah, aye. It is kind of the kind of game that you would tend. Gray has looked to Campbell in the past. Obviously, he's missed the last couple, but I don't think it seems to be a serious issue for him. The way Gray was talking, it sounds like he'll be expected back pretty soon. But it is that way because your game plan is probably changing quite significantly from the way it was on Tuesday night. There is going to be an element, although this isn't a sort of vintage Celtic side, if you like. They are still at their best. Their levels above pretty much everybody else in the league. You do tend to have to do a job on Callum McGregor. Just a comment here, actually, coming in. Zach Mitchell can do it right back, so can Chaiwa. Zach Mitchell, he's kind of disappeared off the face of the earth since he came in. Not really been given much of a chance. Might get into the matchday squad this Sunday with Grant Hanley being suspended. But I think you make a good point, just coming back to it, about maybe the options at right back. Difficult to pitch Chris Cadden in as an orthodox right back again, especially against Celtic. So I don't know if I'd anticipate a change of shape. Maybe some changes in personnel. Does Thibaut Clegy come back into the side? It kind of looked, I think, a few weeks ago as though, Clegy, he sort of arrived as a Hibs player. He had the really good goal against Livingston. He scored up at Aberdeen again. I was really impressed with him. Obviously, that changed up for the St Mirren game, and Hibs had 2 games in a week. Boyle comes back in, does well. Cleagy's kind of found himself back out again. I mean, do you read anything into that, or has it just been a case of, I think, you touched on when we're talking about the team selection for Motherwell, about the consistency in picking a team that was winning? Do you think that's?
I think that's what it's been. Yeah, but I think Boyle's place is up for grabs. I think if you're Clegy and you look at the miss that Boyle's had on Tuesday night, I mean, but Boyle's had a gilt-edged opportunity to get us back into the game, and there's a still picture of him just as he's about to hit the ball. And if you showed that, like in Question of Sport and what happened next, if anybody said anything other than he scores a goal, they would have been ridiculed. And he didn't score a goal. So I would be. I don't think Boyle's been particularly good the last few games either. So I would probably bring Clegy in, who I think has offered more.
Yeah, I've been impressed with him every time he's played, Thibaut Clegy. I think he probably does deserve another shout for this game. Again, I'd imagine you probably will see changes to an extent. Again, all this depends on fitness and how players came through the game on Tuesday. A bit of a left field shout here. Newell has to come in on Sunday. He's a leader and will put in a tackle. I mean, as much as Joe Newell is desperate, I'd imagine, to get back on the pitch, but he's not played for nearly a year. I don't know how much he would thank you for getting flung back in against Celtic from the start at Easter Road. I think we're probably more likely to see him being drip-fed back into the team, would you say? But it is good to see him back in the squad, isn't it? I think we didn't really touch on that so much after the Dundee game at the weekend. It is good to see him back in and around it, I suppose.
Yeah, and I know there's a thing about absence making the heart grow fonder and everything, but you get the feeling that we wouldn't have seen the midfield performance on Tuesday night that we saw had we had Joe Newell in there. Like, he's a bit more, as Jay Star said in the comment there, about being a leader. I think he's more likely to make something happen in the middle of the pitch. I don't think he's ready to start yet. As well, so I tend to agree with you, Liam, that we're more likely to see him drip fed in, but it's good to have him available again, definitely. And I think but with the midfield setup, we had the conversation about whether or not our midfield 3 was better than last year's midfield 3 we recorded last week, and I think we kind of fell on the side of it's still a bit too early to say. But with McGrath, Mulligan and Barlas are, I think when you've got Chaiwa, who came on and did well on Tuesday night, I thought he was good when he came on. Newell available. There are options there now to kind of mix it up a wee bit. I think Levitt's available as well, so we might see a different midfield 3 on Sunday.
Yeah, again, it's an area that's up for change. In terms of, I think it's strange because I think there have been games where that midfield 3 has looked as though it's had a nice balance to it. The sort of blend of attributes, Balassa, Mulligan, McGrath, they all bring something a wee bit different. They all have their kind of unique qualities. And I think in terms of last season, I don't remember. I mean, it wasn't really until unless I'm remembering it incorrectly, it was more towards the sort of run towards the back end of the season where you did see it a bit more settled. I remember that was an area I felt like there was a lot of change. I think we might have done an article on that, actually, the sheer number of midfield combinations that were used in the first half of the season. So, I mean, it's been good for Hibs to have consistency of selection in that area, but then, you're thinking, right, they've got that area, locked in, it's sorted out, and then you see a performance like Tuesday night and how easily they're kind of dominated, and it makes you completely second guess everything that you thought you knew about this team. So just, I think to maybe finish up with an article on the website yesterday, just sort of charting obviously yesterday was 12 months since Rocky Bashiri scored that now famous goal, and obviously an awful lot has happened since then. We kind of, the article on the hibsobserver.co.uk website, just kind of charting the entire story of the past year, and then sort of looking at where Hibs have found themselves now, 12 months on. So, Matty, I'm not going to ask you to recount the entire 12 months because there are not enough hours in the day, I think, to go over absolutely everything that's happened. But just, and a year on from that, and considering that, the highs experienced over the back half of the season, the excitement of the European qualifiers, the kind of emotional hammer blow, I think, of losing out against Legia, and then how the season has started. I mean, are you happy with where the club are at 12 months on from then? What is the sort of feeling that you're getting about this season in general and where this team's going? Is it too easy to say? Do you think it's not quite the same team as it was the back half of last season? What's your kind of feeling about what the sort of next chapter is going to look like, if you like?
I think we're not far away from it. I think the difference is the level of consistency. Obviously, we had that big run last season after having a really bad run to kick it off, whereas we've mixed those results up this season. I think performances haven't been that different. And funnily enough, before Tuesday nights, if you take Tuesday night as a bit of an outlier, I think we worked out if Jamie McGrath had scored his last minute penalty against Rangers to get a point there, we would have sat top of the form guide over the last 6 games. So the league table has us still in 3rd place. We're there or thereabouts, and I think we're about where we should be based on our performances. We've had some wins that are really comfortable, some that haven't been, some narrow defeats, some draws where we should have won them, that kind of thing. And I think when I came out Easter Road on Saturday after the Dundee game, we're kind of looking at the level of performance that Hibs put in, and we're really good generally at controlling a game. Like, we have a level of play, and we hit that standard and tend to maintain it. Tuesday was an outlier, we were awful, and hopefully that's just like a one-off like Dundee last year when we went up there and got scudded just before the 3-3. You hope it's an outlier and we get back to it. But I think Gray's done a really good job. There's a bit of noise about him again. Like, the performance was bad enough that the people were looking at Motherwell and how well they played and going, why is our manager not doing that? But I think if you look at, I think we're on track for about 78 points this season if you take our results over the longer period, which is a pretty good return for us. So yeah, to answer your question, I'm pretty happy, pretty comfortable that we're in good hands. I like David Gray. I like what he's doing with the team. He's still learning, obviously, and he will make mistakes, but I think the overall direction of travel is going the right way.
Yeah, I did think that there was, it was poor on Tuesday night, no getting away from that, and it was kind of not acceptable, I don't think. But there was a few extreme reactions to it, I thought, and there was a wee bit of. But is that a symptom of the fact that, of expectations being raised now because of what happened last year? Is that the reality for Hibs now, that the expectations are higher because of that?
I think so. So I think there's a few things at play. So I noticed that there was you sometimes get these sort of rather contrived stats. So we haven't beaten a team outside the bottom 8 in the league so far this season. So nobody in the top 4. If you remember back to Jack Ross's time, everybody had the thing about him never winning a big game. He did win a couple of big games, but it was that was his thing. This appears to be the thing that's kind of emerging about David Gray. And I think we've had too many frustrating results, which I think is what really sticks with people. So the last minute goals conceded or goals just before half time, being 2-0 up and not winning the games. So and not too many of the really, really convincing wins that we saw last year. So I think there's a sort of like bubbling undercurrent of dissatisfaction with how the team's doing at the moment. But I think if you take a step back and you actually look at the evidence, like the XG tables and all these things that kind of back up what you're seeing, we're in a pretty good place. So I think it's just about perspective. I think you're right. I think expectations have risen, and the team haven't necessarily risen with them. But I think we will be all right.
Yeah, I'd be inclined to agree with you. I know there's been a few disappointments so far this season. I think I think some of the frustration probably stems from a sort of sense of what if in quite a few games, from being in strong positions. And then I know everybody probably does it, where you then look at the league table and you think, well, if Hibs hadn't conceded that goal when they were 2-0 up, and then you look at how much better it might look, and you start to think, well, but I mean, again, don't want to make it sound like I'm excusing some of the points that have been dropped this season, because there has been some disappointments. But I mean, kind of broadly in line with yourself, I think it's Hibs in a decent place at the moment. And I think in terms of Tuesday, you're talking about maybe, is it an outlier? Is it not? I think, the evidence that we've got compared to previous results suggests that, there's nothing to suggest that it isn't an outlier. And I think until that changes, you kind of have to treat it like that. But no doubt this is a big game on Sunday, because I think, Celtic have shown, teams have shown that you can get at Celtic. St Mirren were probably felt pretty aggrieved not to get at least a point for their performance against them last week. They are a wee bit more vulnerable, I think, just in terms of the players that they have available aren't quite at the same quality as what we've seen over the past few years. It does look as though they're about to appoint a new permanent manager. Whether he'll be in the dugout for Sunday, I'm not too sure. At this point, it'd probably have to quite a quick turnaround on that, considering they've also got a European game away at Feyenoord. But yeah, that's nothing to do with Hibs really. But I do think there is maybe a wee opportunity to go and get a good result against them this weekend. But until then, we'll have to wait and see. Tomorrow is the press conference, as usual, at HCC. We'll be there to cover that. We'll hear from David Gray and one of the players. If you're watching us on YouTube, folks, and you're not subscribed to the channel yet, can I just implore you, perhaps, to lend us your support and subscribe to the channel, like the video. It's all free. It means we can continue to grow the channel. It means you get a notification every time we go live. On top of the live videos, we've also got interviews with player and manager after every single game, so you can get all that on there as well. So your support does mean an awful lot to us, and we do appreciate it. But the more of you we can get on board, the more we can continue to grow the channel. But for now, thanks to you folks for joining us. Thanks for all your comments today. Sorry if we didn't get through all of them, but we do appreciate you joining in. Thanks to Matty, as always, for joining us and for his insight. Do stay tuned for our build up to the Celtic game over the weekend. But until then, folks, enjoy the rest of your week, and we'll speak to you again soon. Cheers.